where on a society level, we could do a national meeting and talk about this profession and get people excited and get people connected.
On Ultrasound today, we spend a good amount of time talking about ultrasound education, but the pathway to becoming a sonographer isn't always clear-cut for everyone. And our guest today has a unique journey that you'll want to hear about. Jennifer Acevedo is the clinical educator in echocardiography at Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago and has over 20 years of experience in the field. She has organized dozens of meetings in the past, and she's a member of the American Society of Echocardiography and also holds the Advanced Cardiac Sonographer credential. And she's actually in the ASE Leadership Academy right now. Not only that, but she also sits on the board of directors for the Society of Pediatric Echocardiography and is their Sonography Chair. So thank you, Jennifer, for taking time out of your busy schedule to discuss education with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Emmanuel, for inviting me. I'm so excited to do this.
So as I alluded to in the beginning, you have a unique story to tell us about how you became a sonographer, because like I said, the pathway isn't the same for everyone. And when you started telling me about how it was that you became a sonographer, I remember thinking, we have to tell people about this. This is the topic of the interview for sure. So please tell us, how did you first become interested in sonography?
Well, when I was graduating from high school, I knew I wanted to go into healthcare, but didn't know what I wanted to do. And back then, it was doctor or nurse. That's all you knew. And I happened to go to a career fair, and there was a school there that had allied health professions, and they talked to me about EKG, and then EKG was a way to segue into echocardiography. And so I did that. I was working in a hospital doing EKGs, and it was a 3 to 11 shift, and I tagged along with one of the sonographers just to see what it looked like. And I was hooked from the moment I saw it. And this is back in the late 90s, Hewlett Packard, HP 2500. It looked like a spaceship. Like there's like a little screen this big. You're touching all of these buttons. It was, And then after that, I tagged along with another sonographer to go do a baby, and you could see everything so much clearer. And we were looking at connections that we never looked at with the adults. And I knew I wanted to do that. And it was just a matter of figuring out a way.
Right. And how quickly did you go into pediatrics?
I was lucky. So again, this is the late 90s. There was a position at the University of Chicago that this is back when there was no career builder. This is newspapers and Sunday classifieds. Right. And they had a position for a sonographer. They were looking for a pediatric echo sonographer, but if they couldn't find one, they were willing to take the right adult sonographer to train them. And I knew it was, I was working at a community hospital and didn't have any pediatric experience. I knew it was a long shot, but I definitely have the mentality, like all they can say is no, and that's not going to hurt me. So I applied, I interviewed, and they were pretty upfront with me that I wasn't what they were looking for, and I wasn't going to fit the need that they had right then and there. However, they would keep me in mind. And 6 months later, I get a phone call from the lab director, and he tells me, I can't find anybody. Will you take this position? And I was like, he's like so reluctant because he has to train me. And I'm like, yes, this is the opportunity. And I had been waiting for. And I was doing adults for about 2.5 years, and then got my break into pediatrics. And I think that's how a lot of pediatric cardiac sonographers then got into doing pediatric echo, because there weren't pediatric echo schools, or not a lot of them. There still isn't a lot of them. So it was somebody retires or somebody moves away and leaves their pediatric echo job, and then an adult sonographer could kind of fill that gap. The climate has changed a lot, especially since the pandemic, but that's how I got into my pediatric echo lab.
That's remarkable. And now you mentioned that was at the University of Chicago. So is there a research component involved as well, or you were just strictly on the clinical side?
No, Emmanuel, it was I was so young. So this is I graduated from high school in 1997. I
Right.
go to EKG school. I get my first job in a hospital in 1998. This is
Mm,
2002. I'm in my young 20s and I'm working in a lab that is doing research. We were doing all of the Amplatzer device, ASD devices. We were doing FDA trials for that, for the PDA device, for the VSD devices,
right.
and it was my first experience in an academic center.
Mm,
And I just assumed like everybody does this at every hospital. So I really didn't realize
yeah.
how fortunate I was to be part of such an innovative
Mm,
team at the time. But, as you get older and you get more experience, you realize it. But I was involved with research very early on. And you're just in an academic hospital, so you're just going to see that higher acuity patients and just like learning in a fast pace, and it definitely kind of set the precedence um, for the way I am today. I like
right.
even when I started there, I was quickly exposed to educational meetings and helping with meeting planning, and just very, very early on. Again, not realizing that this isn't what everybody's doing every day at their
Yeah.
job. So
Yeah. I'm sure that that was a big contributing factor to where you are today, right? As a clinical educator, having that research component, that's really cool. And it was remarkable, of an opportunity for you being so early on in your sonography career. Yeah.
1000%.
Yeah, yeah. So fast forward to 2024, you're the clinical educator in echo at Lurie Children, so you're still in pediatrics. Compared to other sonography roles that you've had over your career at this point, could you tell us a little more about this one in particular? What's it like to be a clinical educator, and what insights could you offer to a sonographer, maybe that they're kind of mid-career and they're interested, they see this role pop up in their facility, what would you tell them? What are some of the key insights you've learned there?
Well, first of all, super fortunate to have the position. The hospital definitely realized that there was a need and then kind of created a unique position for me. So very early on at University of Chicago, we had cardiology fellows, and
Mm,
I was responsible for training the cardiology fellows. And a little bit different from adult cardiology fellows and pediatric cardiology fellows is the pediatric cardiology fellows, they have to perform a complete transthoracic echocardiogram. They have a
oh,
certain number that they have to do. So you're kind of training somebody to be a cardiac sonographer in a very short amount of time.
right.
Um, and I just, there was just something like I loved it, and I loved working with the fellows, and I just continued it everywhere I went, working with the fellows and being heavy in education and kind of just being a sponge, soaking up, listening to what people were doing, and kind
Mm,
of taking whatever I heard you doing and figuring out how can I incorporate that into what I do here. So 2024 at Lurie Children's, I work a lot with our cardiology fellows, with them getting onboarded with doing their just being a cardiac sonographer in a matter of a couple of months. So we do a lot of education planning with that. So yeah, working with the medical students that may have an interest in cardiology. Echocardiography is the bread and butter of any cardiology program, adult or pediatric echo. And so giving them that solid foundation of a basic understanding, very high level, but that's what they're going to be looking at a lot with their cardiologists and trying to put a clinical picture together. So that's important there. I also work with our residents that are interested in going into cardiology fellowship, and I have been able to get a few of them that have been accepted into cardiology fellowship, a nice solid understanding of echocardiography, to kind of just give them one less thing to have to worry about, especially in those first 2 weeks of cardiology fellowship when like the whole kitchen sink's being thrown your way.
Right.
In addition to that, I just launched a program that we put together advanced practice provider echocardiography curriculum. So recognizing echo views and then eventually being able to do some high level interpretations, especially for those APPs that are seeing patients in clinic alone. So that's going to focus on our APNs and our physician assistants. And I'm excited for that. We're not teaching any sort of scanning or anything like that. This is just going to be a lot of view recognition and function assessments. Again, very high level, but definitely something I'm looking forward to. And I was just talking to one of our pediatric cardiac anesthesiologists. He's like, I want us to do that. So there's always somebody else I'm teaching at our hospital.
That's so interesting. That's really, really an interesting role, right? To be able to kind of be a liaison, so to speak, right, between the different clinical areas or different clinicians. Because in your case, you're actually not training sonographers, right? You're not conducting on-the-job training for people who want to be sonographers, other clinicians. That's not really what you're doing. It's completely focused more on the med students and things of that nature, the fellows.
Yes, and I do a lot of our educational meeting coordination as well. We have within our lab, we have these, for lack of better words, buckets where are you interested in research? Then we'll put you in the research track. Are you interested in education? You go in the education track. So I do have partnerships. I do have relationships with our cardiology schools or our echocardiography schools. And I am a liaison for getting the students to us. But then once they're in the lab, they'll work with one of the sonographers that's in the educational promotion track, seeing patients.
I see. That also, I'm sure, is really of value to the sonographers working in the lab who want to be on the education track to have that opportunity. That's not like that in every place, so that's really unique in
Yeah,
that sense.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah. It just opens doors and, and it gives you the opportunity because, let's say maybe you do want to do research and you go into that research track and it's not for you. Well, then you're not really married to it either. You could say, I tried this, but now I want to try this. And you could go into education. We also have a procedural one where it's our sonographers that are helping out with cath lab procedures and OR procedures with the 3D TEE. And so there's a lot of opportunity for growth in the buckets. But the one thing, you can't, and I have to tell this to myself all the time, like you can't do everything. You can't. As much as you want to, like you just can't. If you want to be good at something, you really have to kind of focus and hone in on what that one thing is.
It's true. It's true. It's important to have that focus to actually like get that depth of knowledge, right? In that one area. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how important would you say in your role is engagement with the different societies? I mean, I know, of course, you're pretty involved. You are the sonography chair for the Society of Pediatric Echo on their board of directors. So obviously, I'm asking someone who's very involved, but especially in your role as a clinical educator, how important is that for you to then be able to create these programs? What does it contribute?
It's so important to be, we're in that era of, we have to have our work-life balance, but it's still so important to be involved in your profession outside with these outside societies. One, you get a sense of community. Some of my best friends I've met at the American Society of Echo annual meeting, and it's, like you meet there, but then you stay in touch afterward, and it's twofold, right? It's my mental health. Like you can relate to something I'm going through. Maybe I need to vent. Maybe maybe you're going to have advice on how I can do a process change to make something better. So that it's that component, but then it's also the component of quality assurance. Like, hey, how are you guys doing this here? And So you get that sense of networking when you go to these meetings, when you're involved in your societies. And, even on a more local level, there's a group between Lurie and Northwestern that we're bringing back the Chicago Society of Echo. So that's like on a local level where we started it at the end of 2022. We had our first meeting. We had about 50 participants. And then 2023, we're getting up to 80, 85 participants. And now 2024, we're doing like the website and all of these things and growing it. But because again, not every person, every hospital has a budget to send people to these meetings. And so that's why on a local level, it's so important to educate our community sonographers that may not have that opportunity to get to a national meeting, but at the same time, encourage them that even being a member, you're open to so much education, webinars and guidelines and, JACE, the papers and things like that with the Society of Pediatric Echo. They have a monthly educational webinar. And so you're exposed to those things without having to go and fly away if you don't have the means or the desire to do it. But it does take, a little bit extra. There are some times where, I'm on a subcommittee meeting and it's in the evening, but, I'll have my apron on, my AirPods in, and I'm making dinner while I'm listening and contributing. It's like multitasking. But I do think it's worthwhile, especially on the American Society of Echo side of things. I get to interact with adult colleagues and hear how they're doing things and what are they doing things. And I told you, I'm always listening and saying, oh, how can I take that and bring that back to my lab and make a new something? Like I was just at a KHEP educators meeting, and there was somebody from the medical lab side of things talking about like their profession and how people aren't going to school for those types of positions. And I'm listening to her and I'm like thinking about what I'm going to talk about with my high school students that I mentor on but relating it back to echocardiography. And so I think that, again, I'm a sponge. Everybody, I'm not saying you have to dedicate every night of the week, but a little bit of extra time to some sort of society, just for professional development too. I think it goes a long way.
Absolutely. The professional development and the networking are two things that I hear often from sonographers and other clinical leaders who are actively involved in these societies. Those are two things that they always mention because like you say, you bounce ideas off of each other, right? It's like sharing ideas. It's better than a book, really, when you think about it, to be able to actually share real experiences. That's the ultimate, the pinnacle of that development. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm seeing now, like a lot of these professional organizations, and I know we're going to talk about it later, like with Leadership Academy, a lot of these societies have been developing their own leadership academies. But the next thing I think is the next big thing for support is going to be mentorship. I remember when I attended my first American Society of Echo meeting, this is I think 2008, it was in Toronto, and I went by myself. And I was a small fish in a very big pond. I'm an extrovert and I was overwhelmed. Like, I don't know who I should talk to. Are these people approachable? Like, I've read a chapter that this person wrote, but will they be willing to say hi to me? And I think that that's so important. Like when I meet new sonographers at these meetings, like come in, let me give you a hug, because I want you to feel that sense of community when you go. Because again, if you don't go with a lot of your own colleagues, going by yourself, it's just so easy to kind of get sucked up in these big rooms. And then, there's people that do have like all of their colleagues that they have networked and they're so excited. And I just never want anybody left behind. So I definitely want to figure out like, how can we like early sonographers, how can we kind of bring them in, embrace them and, because that's going to engage newer sonographers. Like, I can tell you, join a society and we're going to network and we're going to do this, but, it's not that simple. And so, maybe at the next meeting, we do have like these early career meet and greets to kind of start those networkings on a smaller level.
Yes, and I mean, the engagement is important because sonography is hard, healthcare is hard.
Yeah.
There's a shortage, which is a big theme. And it's, we've even seen how, especially after the pandemic, some sonographers, like other clinicians, left the field because it was a lot. There was a lot of burnout that was rampant, especially I know in the hospital setting. And so that engagement is so important to have a network, that can support you throughout your journey, especially as you're new and you're unsure, which I'm sure every clinician experiences, every sonographer experiences. So that leads me actually into the next question, because looking forward, what growth opportunities do you see for pediatric echocardiography education specifically, especially when it comes to addressing that shortage that we have?
Yeah. Well, I hit on it a little bit when we first started talking. When I was able to get into a lab years ago, that you were waiting for that person to retire, that person to move away. Now, pediatric hospitals all over the country have openings, have a lot of openings. There's a lot of travelers, which we didn't see pre-pandemic. I think that, it's important to get the word to high school students. I'm really fortunate at Lurie Children's. We have a team that's called the Workforce Development Team, and it's a whole group of people that they target schools, and they go to teach kids about all different healthcare careers. And so I'm one of their consistent volunteers, and I talk to kids, not only high school students, even junior high students, to pique their interest in going into healthcare, but then the high school students telling them about this career, because when it depends on your counselor is not going to know every intricate detail in every field. And I think even now, it's still, when you go into a hospital, you're a nurse or a doctor, and that's it. There's no in between. But once you get into healthcare, there's so many in betweens. And so I think focusing on the next generation coming into the workforce, that's very, very important. And then education. The American Society of Echo just released their new pediatric echo guidelines. But I think on a society level, there needs to be more with engaging with college-age children, high school-age children, but on a society level. Because I'm in Chicago. I'm in one very small part of the country where, on a society level, we could do a national meeting and talk about this profession and get people excited and get people connected. If Billy in Tennessee somewhere wants to do is interested in echocardiography, maybe we could pair him with somebody in Tennessee that could mentor him with the right programs to go to, etc. And so I think that there definitely needs to be more on a society level to keep our profession growing. If not, the shortage is going to be here. It's like no end in sight. Patients are getting sicker and sicker. And with us not having people going into the field, what do? And then the hospitals are also competing not only with a lack of students, but then even within the hospital, there's always people that will want to go into industry. And so they're on the other side. They're still in patient care. They're just on the other side of things. They're not the front facing anymore. And so there's that competition too. So we definitely need more and more people. I remember there was a time when, again, this is going back to not even career builders, like looking at the paper and the classifieds and seeing like, there's not a lot of echo jobs. Like, am I in the right field? Like, is this sustainable? And yes, the truth is it's very sustainable, even with all of the AI that is being incorporated into machines. I think when we first got automation, there was a little bit of a fear that the machine's going to take over my job. But the truth is, you're always going to need a sonographer. And so I think that that's one way of addressing the education or the sonographer shortage is targeting people that are getting ready to go into college and just letting them know that this is something that you could do.
And that's a really good point, because sometimes I think that especially among, the young generation, there is a lack of awareness of all the different roles in healthcare, which, like you said, there's a lot of people just in a hospital working a lot of different roles. And sonography, of course, is an important part of that. And even within sonography, you already mentioned how you look at echocardiography, there's adult, there's pediatric, there's so many different ways, that of different specialties within sonography itself. So that awareness is just such a key, for the future, because like you said, if not, there's just no end in sight. At least that's what it feels like. Now, in your specialty in particular, in pediatric echocardiography, what do you think are some steps that we could take, though, to improve accessibility to some quality education? Because, like you said, all those years ago, it was really hard to be able to get into it. Wasn't that many jobs. Now we have more jobs, but how can we get more echocardiographers who are interested in it to pursue it? Is there an accessibility issue? Is that something that you've seen, or do you think there's just a lack of awareness? What is it?
Probably both, but lean heavy on the accessibility issue. A lot of echo programs are adult echo focused. They may have a small component to make you aware of pediatric echocardiography, but your main focus is adult echocardiography.
Right.
There are a couple of programs out there that do have a dedicated pediatric echo component to your overall education, but there's not many. The majority is going to be these adult echo programs. And so from one thing we've done at Lurie Children's is we're partnering with a local program. We've developed a pediatric education curriculum that will be given by our sonographers, and then we'll take one of their students that is interested in pediatric echo. That's the other caveat, is not everybody's going to want to work with sick kids. That's just the truth of the matter. Yeah. So every cohort we're identifying one. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's where the sonographer shortage is a double-edged sword. If we could take more students, we would, but we can't burn our sonographers out at the same time educating, because that's a long day. That's the other thing you have to look at, is we're teaching our cardiology fellows. We have a responsibility to them with us being part, with having a cardiology fellowship, but then also we've taken adult sonographers that we're training in pediatric echo, and then adding students into the mix too. When you train somebody, you may not scan as much, but it is so mentally exhausting. By the end of the day, your brain is fried, and then you have to do it the next day. And so there's that fine balance. But I think if you have pediatric centers that are willing to partner to some degree with local programs, that does open up some doors for other students to see, this may be something I'm interested in.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's hard. There's the challenges there, because, like you mentioned, teaching is difficult, and a sonographer already has their job. Even if they're not scanning as much, it's hard. You have to have the right teacher, right personality. There's a lot of things, I'm sure, that go into building that. So, last question, because you kind of alluded to it. We do have a lot of viewers that are in the ASE. They are echocardiographers now, and I'm sure that they'd love to hear a little more about your experience thus far in the ASE Leadership Academy, because from what I've heard from other individuals who've been through it, they say it's really great. So could you just share some insights into what that's been like, especially for maybe an echocardiographer who's interested in potentially joining the next cohort?
Yes, this is my favorite part. I am so excited to talk about this. ASE Leadership Academy, it has been so beneficial with professional development, even personal growth. When I did my annual review with my director, she even made the comment. She's like, "Jen, I feel like you've grown exponentially over the last year," and it was something I didn't tell her, but I had truly tried to work on it and taking all my nuggets from Leadership Academy. And so to hear her say that and like recognize it, it was just like, yes, I'm winning.
Yeah.
And yeah, like it's just, it is so good. It like I was a little nervous because I tend to overextend myself. Like I want to be involved with this. Remember, I told you you kind of like can't be involved with everything.
Yeah.
Something Leadership Academy taught me. So I'm learning to hone it down. But when I signed up for it, I was kind of nervous. Like I need to make sure I do really well, and I'm going to have to clear my plate. And but they recognize that we're all professionals and we don't have 20 hours a week to do all of these assignments and things like that. And so it's like it gives you the tools you need to learn more about a specific topic. It's just the right amount. I haven't there hasn't been a time where I've like felt anxious or overwhelmed that I can't get my reading done or my assignment done. Right now we're in our capstone project phase, and it's fun. Like, yes, I have 20 other things on my plate, but I'm excited about this. I'm excited to see where it can go within ASE. And then I told you, I'm always like trying to see what I can do at my place. And so I'm using it twofold, and it's going to implement this project in our place as well. But yeah, like it was just, there's this, again, a sense of community.
Right.
Your speakers, every month you have an expert on the topic that we're talking about, but then they're paired with an ex-Leadership Academy member that can speak from the healthcare perspective. And I mean, some of these people, just even listening to when they speak and their intentional pauses, it's just little things like that you're like, oh, that sounds good. Oh, I'm going to do that next time.
Yeah.
And I can't say enough about Leadership Academy and how beneficial it has been to me. And I'm kind of sad it's ending in June. We graduate, and yeah, I'm sad about it because it's been that fun.
No, I mean, that's great to hear. That's how you know it's been a valuable experience, is if you're sad that it's ending. It wasn't excruciating to go through, but that's really great to hear. I mean, I've heard other good things about it, and I think it's such an important initiative from the American Society of Echo to have this program to develop more sonographers, into the leaders. I mean, some of you are already leading. I'm sure you're already leading for sure in your institution. But to go through this and be side by side with those people, I'm sure that has a value that you really can't put a monetary number on it, for sure.
1000%. It's definitely, I'm very fortunate to be part of it, and it's been impactful.
Well, thank you so much again, Jennifer, just for sharing so many insights. I think this is really insightful, especially for other echocardiographers, whether they're in pediatric or adult, and just in general for the sonography community and the medical community, to be aware of the need that there is, and just different steps that you mentioned that I think are so important to take into account of how we can address that shortage and just create a greater awareness for the future as well.
Yes, thank you so much for selecting me. I appreciate the opportunity, and I am a person that what I say I mean. And if after people watch this, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm sure I'll be tagged in this. If there's any questions about joining a local society or one of the professional societies, please, sonographers, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to be a mentor to anybody that needs some guidance.